With Navarre back in the Federation, can this more united Federation deal with the DMA, or will there be more issues for our crew to contend with? This week's Star Trek Discovery episode is one of my personal favourites of the 4th season so far, but why is that? Let's explore. Welcome to Trek Central, I'm your host Captain Jack, and let's get right into it. The 5th episode of Season 4 of Discovery is titled The Examples, and it's written by Kyle Jarrow and directed by Lee Rose. Lee Rose has actually directed for Discovery before, with the episodes Choose Your Pain in Season 1 and An Opal for Charn in Season 2. However, Kyle Jarrow is a newcomer to the scene in terms of writing, so we're very much looking forward to what we have in store for us this episode. The description for this episode is as follows. Burnham and Book race to evacuate a group of stranded colonists in the anomaly's path, as one of the Federation's brightest scientists comes aboard the USS Discovery to do high-stakes research with Saru and Stamets. Of course, like usual, if you don't want to keep up to date on all the latest Star Trek news, lore and more, then make sure to hit that subscribe button to never miss a video from myself and the team here at Trek Central. You can also follow us on social media for daily updates on the Star Trek universe. Of course, a spoiler warning, as this review will contain spoilers for this episode. You have been warned, so turn away now if you haven't watched it. Anyway, let's fly. Okay, so first off, I have to give credit to Kyle Jarrow for this episode. This, I feel, was one of the best written episodes of Discovery. The characters were handled amazingly. The story was gripping, and what it does for our season arc is so amazing that I simply cannot wait for the rest of the season so far. This episode has made the DMA a more interesting story arc in my opinion. It's fleshed out and has more impact than simply being the emotional impact we got from Quajon's destruction. Not only was the writing of this episode great from a writing point of view, but from a Star Trek point of view as well. This episode not just feel like a continuation of Discovery, with repercussions of the Emerald Chain coming to light, mentions of Aurelio and Navarre ships, which look really sexy by the way, but a continuation of past Star Trek, with mentions of Metrons, Iconians, Nasine and the Q Continuum, making this episode feel like a part of a massive spanning universe, yet still adding to it in beautiful ways. The episode even starts like this, with a USS Janeway approaching the DMA, which is being watched by 2 Starfleet vessels and a Navarre starship. We get a small look at some Navarre ships at the end of Star Trek Discovery Season 3, which is to say we saw very little of them. This season has done a much better job at showing us the ships, so it sounds like the creators really heard the fans when we said this last season. The Navarre ship looks amazing, and has a floating warp ring, which is very Vulcan and reminds me of SWAT classes from decades ago, or centuries ago actually. But also it's very 32nd century, so I cannot wait to get a model of this ship. We've got models behind us by the way. It's also called the NSF T'Pau, named after the notable Vulcan T'Pau, who was seen in Star Trek Enterprise and most notably in the original series, during the famous episode Amok Time. There has also been another Vulcan starship called the T'Pau, but can you remember which episode or movie it was in? I'll let you figure it out. This episode is all about the DMA moving location and being in the path of a former Emerald Chain colony, which is great. I'll keep saying, I was disappointed that the Emerald Chain simply just disappeared after the death of Saru in Season 3 of Discovery, but Season 4 is making up for that disappointment by having the ramifications of the Chain's actions still feel present. With last episode we had an old pain between 2 cadets caused by the Chain's actions flare up, and in this episode we have an old practices flare up when prisoners on the colony being left to be killed by the DMA as an example, hence the episode name, The Examples. When we first saw the premise in teasers of this week's episode, I was immediately excited because this very much feels like a next generation plot, evacuating colony with the colonists intentionally leaving behind their undesirables. Now, going back to the idea of this episode really feeling like part of a universe, the species on this colony are the Akali, which are first seen in Star Trek Enterprise Season 1, a species going for the medieval era, so of course 1,000 years later, after we've previously seen them, they will be present in the galactic community, and that is amazing to see. Definitely recommend watching the episode by the way. What was also fascinating and weird about the writing of this episode was that whenever I had issues with the writing, it would seemingly also realise the issue and correct itself within the course of the episode. At first, when all the criminals were simply petty criminals of small crimes, I thought this was too easy, and of course the right thing to do is to take them to freedom. But when it introduced us to the character of Felix having murdered a man, it got a little bit more complicated. Speaking of which, let's talk about Felix a little bit more. He was such an interesting character, and at first a Javert style character, committing a small crime but getting us such a big punishment for it. And then this changed when we find out that he murdered someone. However, Felix is deeply regretful of his actions, and he even wants to stay at the prison to atone for his crimes. He even gives back a family trinket to the daughter of the man he killed, albeit indirectly gives it back thanks to Captain Burnham. But he still becomes a character in this episode which will probably be remembered outside of this episode as well. I also have to hand it to the writing team here, this was fantastic. This choice of Felix, allowing him and the agency to stay and die on his colony, or trying to save him, also adds some very interesting drama between Burnham and Book, with Book really wanting to save everyone, and the fact that they don't save Felix for himself really affects Book in a sense. I can see these feelings carrying on into future episodes, and I can't wait to explore how it goes. Now, talking about Book's anger, we do have to talk about Tarka, and yes, the segue will just make sense soon. Tarka may just been a favourite new character in Discovery. From just this short amount of time we get of him, it helps massively that he's played by actor Sean Doyle, an excellent actor who you may have known as playing United Nations Deputy Undersecretary Sadovir Ehrenreich in The Expanse TV adaptation. But if you haven't watched The Expanse, it does seem like Sean Doyle has been typecast as a man seemingly doing good, but not in so good ways. We're looking at you, Ehrenreich. Originally I did have issues with Tarka. Why isn't he just Aurelio from season 3? Why is he in such a rush to solve the DMA and threatening the Discovery just to expedite this research by a couple of hours? But just like I said, these issues seemingly resolve themselves within this episode. Tarka being a Rising, though maybe part Rising due to no circle around his Rising forward mark, was a neat touch. And we still do get a mention of Aurelio, with Tarka and Aurelio working on the next generation of spore drive technology, which is some fascinating world building outside of the episode in a sense. Tarka is an interesting scientist character, very different from what we've gotten on Trek before. Most of our scientists are wearing science outfits or are very formal and serious about their research, and Tarka is, but with a more casual outfit and mannerisms, he very much stands out compared to his contemporaries in the Star Trek field. An issue I did have with the character during this episode was the rush he was in to solve the DMA. This is an issue of season 3 of Discovery. Why is there such a rush to solve a mystery that is over 100 years old? Obviously we can make our reasoning, but it's still a little confusing, especially when the DMA experiment done in this episode can wait until they're finished with the evacuation mission. But then by the end of the episode, everything starts to fit together, and we get a possible reason why Tarka so desperately wants to understand the DMA. The mark on the back of his neck during a scene of Book in the bar. Tarka talks about how anger is a great motivator, one he seemingly understands, and then he touches the back of his neck which has some sort of scar on it. I believe the scar is an emerald chain device, but it's inserted onto the back of the neck of their slaves, back when the emerald chain was still around. We see this getting put on the slave workers in season 3 episode Scavengers, and even a mark leaves behind on Book. This might be why Tarka is in such a rush to understand the DMA, and it could possibly be why he wants revenge against the emerald chain, and recreating something on the scale of the DMA would be a good way to do it. We also have the fact that Tarka knows more about the origins of the DMA, not all of the information, but at least enough to rule out the Iconians. But Tarka specifically says he believes it was placed in this space and time, so it could come from the future or even the past, in which case it is possible that Tarka himself created it in the future and sent it back to destroy the Emerald Chain territory. So far, the dark matter anomaly has destroyed Quajon, a planet formerly aligned with the Chain, and this Emerald Chain colony in episode 5. So, if Tarka was previously a slave worker for the Chain, he would have angers towards the Chain, and has found something to take his revenge. But then the plot points do kind of fit together, but I'm not convinced, personally. If anything, Tarka has become a fascinating character, which I look forward to seeing more of, mainly because Sean Doyle is a fantastic actor and wonderful at playing this type of character, so hopefully he turns up in more than one episode. An aspect of this episode that was weird was our bridge crew were not our normal bridge crew. Perhaps another shift aboard for Discovery, but we also had a Schlium-like alien at Orsican's console, and the return of Lieutenant Christopher. It was nice to see that Discovery has more officers than just the normal ones we see, and this episode was spectacular for Lieutenant Reese as well, or should I say Lieutenant Commander Reese. He led the evacuation effort and we got some backstory of his town being destroyed by a hurricane, and it was Starfleet who rescued him. This season has addressed a lot of criticisms about the show, and it's just growing stronger because of it. Some other small details which stood out to me were the following. Book's hand pistol, being Quajon, with a wood styling to it. Also, Zora, the Discovery's computer, but actually the onboard artificial intelligence, is developing more, being able to understand emotions now, becoming more like the Zora we know from the short trek Star Trek Calypso. Also, aliens mispronouncing Earth names like Galileo instead of Galileo just makes sense and was kinda cool to see. Speaking of things which are cool to see, the return of Commander Jet Reno, it's great to see, and with how she does in these episodes and batches, it'll be great to see in the next couple of episodes as well. Personally, I can't wait. The environment in this episode, particularly when Burnham and Book are walking towards a prison structure, is the first time we saw the AR wall, the piece of technology Star Trek Discovery currently films with, in use. We'll stick an image on screen now, that was released earlier back either this year or last year I believe, and shows the AR wall in production use. But you can certainly see how the two dynamics mix. I spotted that instantly. So, before we do finish the review, we have to talk about our favourite mysterious character of Kovich. Kovich is seemingly just the local expert guy in Star Trek Discovery, as we glean no new information about the character from his appearance in this episode or the last episode. The scene was beautiful, with him analysing Colbert with brutal honesty. The line, "You died and came back to life," little wonder you're a mess, was excellent, but it addresses an issue with Kovic. We really do not know who he is, because it's just odd to see him and not know anything about him, what capacity he's serving in. I doubt they'll tell us who Kovic actually is, since they probably don't know who he is and it's just an excuse to get David Cronenberg on set. Hell, I'd use that excuse. But when you're always wondering about who he is when he comes on screen, it takes away from what he's actually doing on screen. We should add, Culber's scenes in these episodes are really great and very pressing and topical for our current times. Kovic says this is a uniquely challenging time. If you don't take a break, you will fail people. Something we here at Trek Central need to learn with all the new Trek stuff coming out. In the previous episode, All Is Possible, we learned that Kovic holds the rank of Doctor, so therefore he's proficient in a field, or multiple fields. Given his knowledge of major temporal events, such as the Time Soldier shown in Season 3, it would not surprise me if he was somewhat involved in the temporal affairs, hence keeping an eye on the USS Discovery and crew, given their unique circumstances. Either way, hopefully by the end of Season 4, we learn more about him. Then again, I said that of Season 3. Overall, this is my favourite episode of Season 4 of Star Trek Discovery so far, and might be one of my favourite overall episodes of Star Trek Discovery as a whole. Addressing the issues of past seasons, having solid writing, feeling connected to the Trek world, and just being a joy to watch week to week. This episode really was amazing. With the last 4 episodes of Discovery, I did find myself becoming slightly more bored in all honesty. The story had not really captured myself that well, and I can be a hard person to impress with science fiction. However, with that being said, this episode has restored my focus and love of the show. Discovery feels like the next generation in a sense. That is not a bad thing by the way, I'm not saying it needs to feel like that. More I'm liking the themes of seeing multiple parts of the ship and the crew all doing something different, and contributing to the main event in some form. Finally, Captain Burnham is not the one-hit wonder in doing everything. We got the scientists working away, the bridge crew also doing their own thing. I love it in all honesty. So what do you think about the high stakes episode of Star Trek Discovery? As always with our Star Trek content here on the channel, please let us know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Because if you are talking about Star Trek, then we want to hear about it. Like always, as I say here on the channel, if you do want to keep up to date on all the latest Star Trek news, lore and more, then make sure to hit that subscribe button to never miss a video from the team here at Trek Central. You can also follow us on social media or join our community Discord server. For now, I've been Captain Jack, thank you for watching, and don't worry, we're going to have plenty more videos following this episode as well. I'll see you next time. Live long and prosper, my friends. Goodbye.